This is 2 videos in a row I'm been hitting on PlayStation. And honestly, I might have to make it a trilogy because they've been pissing me off a lot lately. But this video isn't just about PlayStation and remastered delayed release. Also, just to draw a distinction up front, we're talking about remasters, not remakes. So the only changes made to the game was its performance and visual quality, as well as some minor quality of life improvements that might take advantage of more powerful hardware. And usually I don't really care about remasters or even remakes this much. Like, if I didn't play the original game and I'm somewhat interested in it, and sometimes I do buy them. But now it's started to affect games that I actually do care about, for one. And two, and most importantly, most of the remasters coming out nowadays literally have no business being a remaster. Like, either the game is very newly released, so like, we'll say like 2017, maybe 2018 and later, or the style of game it is doesn't require some sort of graphical overhaul or performance overhaul, and the remaster just comes off as a blatant, like one of the most blatant cash grabs. And this is mainly in terms of like AAA gaming. And this is something I could actually talk about just endlessly. So I'm going to try to keep this video shorter and more focused. So I have like 2 to 3 main topics I want to hit. So the first main topic I wanted to discuss was a non-existent risk-taking factor that most big studios or publishers have gotten comfortable taking now. And this is something that the industry for the past like 10 years is just like they've started to spend more resources revisiting proven successes rather than creating new IPs or taking just major design risk. So that would include, again, like remasters and remakes, as well as like very excessive sequels to franchises. I'm looking at you, Capcom.
I'm like, what do you say fuck me for?
But again, for the purpose of remaining focused, we'll stick to remasters for this video. And to me, this is an industry-wide issue. There's no doubt about that. But anyone with more than 2 brain cells knows that this is primarily a Sony issue as of late. The games on the dumbbell are a perfect example in this case. To spare you like the big breakdown of each individual game, I'm just going to draw up a couple of side-by-side comparisons from each game's like original version compared to the remastered version. And it happens almost every single time with one of these Sony games when they get a remaster. The graphics looked the exact same, it's identical. Unless you want to be a snob and take a microscope and be like, see, the texture on the ground 50 yards out is crisper. Unless you're on that level of unemployment, the graphics and the like fidelity of The Last of Us Part 2 remaster, Days Gone remaster, and Horizon Zero Dawn remaster is no different from the original, minus like some lighting and contrast tweaks, which, I mean, really, it's not important. So that can't be where the improvements were made for it to be a remaster. But then we get to my favorite part in this discussion, which is the frames, and oh boy, this nonsense. I really can't stand this nonsense, because Sony, they already refreshed all the PS5 versions of their first party games to include like a performance mode up to 60 FPS, while maintaining the visual fidelity of the original. Whether it's upscaled or native, that doesn't really matter. And it's made these PS5 remastered versions and even the PS5 Pro upgrade versions completely obsolete. Again, like, this is a blatant cash grab. No one can defend. It's just a way to make some easy money from the games that don't even need it in the first place. Now, the first counter that a lot of it's like mainly Sony fans, they like to say this, is, well, it's just a $10 upgrade if you have the original. So it's really not that big a deal. And they're completely missing the entire point of them wasting resources on completely pointless projects instead of allocating those resources to new projects or sequels. If you look at something like The Witcher 3, which added one of the best next-gen upgrades we've seen this generation, with new outfits and missions and accessibility options and performance options to take advantage of the PS5 hardware, all for free, while Sony turned their endeavors into a way to make quick cash, like, the difference is astronomical. Like, in theory, the situation for a remaster should be no different from company to company. It's just about preservation. Like, the difference between what The Witcher did and what these remasters do, well, I mean, if you don't actually include the next-gen upgrades and enhancements and content offerings that are given out, again, all for free, yeah, they're basically the exact same. Like, it's just about preserving the content and making it more available to modern audiences. And I really don't mean to pick on Sony here, because it is an industry-wide issue. But when we're talking about a lack of risk-taking while pursuing really stupid projects, I think Sony is the worst offender of this in this particular instance. For example, with Days Gone selling pretty good on the tail end of about 3 years, Sony's bright idea of fostering successful new IPs is greenlighting a, air quotes, remaster, but then shutting down a Days Gone sequel that could have cranked the horde system and intensity and camp system that made that game so much fun. But then Horizon gets like 5 spin-offs, a live service game that not a single soul in this planet asked for, not even Horizon fans want it. and they get like just unlimited budget, the budget to just do whatever the hell they want to. Like, not everything is going to be a God of War type of seller day one. Sure, it happened with Horizon Zero Dawn, but it's not a guarantee to keep happening every time you release a new IP. That's why you have to constantly push limits and find fresh ideas or unique gameplay loops that make these new IPs stand out. And if it so happens that it takes a while for a new IP to get going, you still have to believe in the project and slowly improve the formula over time. And I think that Sony has lost sight of that, and now they just want to hit a home run every time out because it's happened a few times, instead of just investing into something that might take time to get going and watch it grow as they support it. But to me, it seems like Sony doesn't want to do that anymore. They just want to rely on their big three, you know, Horizon, God of War, The Last of Us, and keep re-releasing those games over again, or doing little spin-off projects or live service projects, which 2 of them have been shut down already, and the third one's probably not going to end up being that good whenever it releases. But you know, all that's fine. You know, Sony can do whatever they want to. They can do whatever they want with their projects. They can greenlight or cancel whatever projects they want to. That's their prerogative. But for me, my breaking point in all of this, and the reason I'm really making this video in the first place, is the whole situation with the Wolf Among Us remaster coming later this year. I swear you couldn't script this shit, because no more than 2 weeks before the Summer's Game Fest event, I made a video talking about the Wolf Among Us 2 and basically saying, like, where the hell is the game? Like, we should have seen the game by now, or at least have an update about the game. And in my research, I found that they were possibly looking into a remake of the Wolf Among Us 1, or sorry, a remaster of the Wolf Among Us 1. And just so I don't repeat myself, here's what I had to say in that video regarding my feelings on a possible remaster of that game. The second comment, coming from Educational Dish, says the OG game getting a remake is a sign that it's not a fully dead horse, but also can't really see the game coming out anymore. It's in this weird limbo where it definitely exists, but also seems to be just out of reach for both the publisher and the consumers. And I did hear that the Wolf Among Us 1 might get a remake, but genuinely it would depress me. Like, I go back and play the Wolf Among Us, the original one, every year or so, and never once have I thought that that game needed a remake. But you know, we live in this remake era where everything needs to be remade instead of making new shit, so I'm not really surprised that something like that does happen, but like, it would actually kill my drive to talk about games anymore if the Wolf Among Us got a remake before the second game comes out. Of course, they confirmed the remaster right alongside the second game's re-announcement. Goddamn, Telltale, can you make up your mind? Like I said in that video, this game didn't need a remaster. The stylistic nature of the noir art style is vibrant enough to be played to the end of time as far as I'm concerned, but nope, gotta make a quick buck. And you know, since we keep wasting years of development and restarting from scratch and losing talent, like, we gotta try to recoup some of that development cost. Like, I'd like to say I'm at a loss for words, but honestly, I'm really not. Like, I'm hot. Like, this has me hot, because this is like genuinely ridiculous. We get remasters for games that didn't come out more than 5 years ago. Like, or games that they hold up amazingly well because of the type of game it is. And whether it's a remaster or upgraded editions or whatever, they actually take a step back in terms of performance and break core functionality of the game, like with Fallout 4's next gen update. Like, bro, I'm up to here with the bullshit remasters that are blatant cash grabs. And the developers think that just because they slap a price tag that's less than $40, well, outside of Bethesda, of course.
Holy Jesus. What is that?
But from that, they expect us to be happy and pat them on the back because apparently they're consumer friendly for not making it $60 or whatever. While other games like The Witcher 3 or even Metro Exodus or even with Warframe, they have equivalent massive updates that are completely for free. I'm genuinely so over it. Now, my next topic is less accusatory and more just a statement of fact, just because of how marketing works nowadays. And I think that it's very unfortunate that nostalgia and brand recognition plays such a big part in today's media and marketing, but I do get it to some degree. Because you can't go anywhere without being reminded about how much better the good old days were. And we're all humans, so don't act like it doesn't affect you. So like for me, recently it was this limited edition PS5 controller that works basically the same as any other PS5 controller, but it had this PS1 aesthetic and it cost twice as much. But I didn't care because of course I had to have it. So it's easy money for these companies, and for that, like, I understand it in a way, because it's up to us as consumers not to get roped in by that nostalgic emotion. Wait, is nostalgia an emotion? Because I actually don't know. Regardless, having that emotion reward companies for having lazy projects instead of looking for the next big project that in 10 years will have that nostalgic, recognizable brand attached to it. Like, it's mostly up to us to hold them to a higher standard and not just buy everything that they remaster because it gives us that nostalgia feeling. Keep in mind, again, this is about remasters, not remakes. That's why the games I'm talking about are all very recent games. None of them are before 2019, outside of The Wolf Among Us from 2013. But none of them are before the 2010s. But for much older titles, like from the 90s and 2000s, remaking those games or even reimagining those games makes complete sense from both a technical stance and a revitalization stance if the series hasn't been touched in almost 20 years. And most people in their mid-20s probably haven't played a single PS2 game. Like, you feel old yet? Because I know I sure do. But that's why there's a difference between remasters and remakes. And we can go on and on and on about the differences between a remake and a remaster all day. And everyone has a different definition for what it means to be a remaster or a remake. My main argument is even when something like a remaster seems pretty underwhelming or useless, it starts to feel very cash grabby. And often it comes from these companies like Telltale, who imploded due to poor resource management and project management, or Sony, who thought they were just God after the PS4 era and started to greenlight everything and started to pursue nonsense. Then they realized too late what they were doing, so to staunch the bleeding, they started to release a bunch of worthless remasters. Another counter I gotten for people who are pro remasters is like, well, the remasters many of these companies put out, it funds their next projects, and even if it's drawing resources away from the other projects, it can add stability if the new project is facing internal issues or something. And I think that's actually a pretty valid reason to bring up. I actually had this conversation with someone else who was pro remaster. That's why I'm saying it. I think the stability many of these AAA studios has been relying on has been a lot of these recent ports or remasters, and it has somewhat allowed them to give their teams chances on like fresh ideas, which is why it's important to say that the point isn't that risk-taking or creativity is completely removed from the industry. But I think the gap between remaster to remaster is often filled with a lot of this mediocre live service slop or even just very underwhelming single-player games. So sometimes you can kind of get the feeling that you're just hopping from one old title to the next, and all the nonsense in between you're just skipping. And even though you might have played this game not too long ago, you might be like, there's nothing else to really play right now, and I really love this game, so for $10 or $20, I'll just play it again with some better performance, and hopefully this will hold me off until the next big thing comes, which coincidentally ends up being another remaster, and it just becomes a vicious cycle that you can't escape. Listen, I understand the developers and company leadership prefer predictability more than anything. You can ask any one of them, do they prefer consistency or volatility? And it's going to be consistency every single time. If they know a certain game sells significantly less overall compared to others, they're going to take that into account before backing a studio making a game in a less favorable genre. And honestly, why wouldn't they? Like, I would do the same shit. So I understand the cautiousness and the hesitation to support new ventures or new ideas. But just like in real life, how you don't grow without some risk, the same thing can be applied to basically everything else, and that includes investments into video games. Like, you might get a stinky every now and again. A single player game that should have popped off didn't because of, I don't know, many circumstances. And actually, I can think of one of them right off the top of my head. Last year's Hell Is Us is an amazing action survival horror game that came out the same day that Silksong Shadow dropped. Like, it's just unfortunate, and there's nothing you can really do about something like that. But that doesn't mean just start avoiding any risky projects or greenlighting something that might take time to find its footing. If every company that ever released a game expected it to be an instant success and massive profits day one, we wouldn't have some of the best games of all time today that we have. Like, honestly, I feel like I'm just sort of talking to myself because I feel like the rate of remasters we're going to be getting is just going to increase in the next like 3 to 4 years. Like, I just have this feeling like we're going to be getting so many remasters from like maybe the PS2 era, which honestly, you know, that's cool. A lot of people didn't get to experience that era, but for me and a lot of other people, it's like been there, done that. I don't want to keep playing these same games over and over and over again. I want some new shit, and I want some innovation in the new shit. I don't want just the same game rinse and repeat. You do something a little bit different and put a 2 or a 3 on it. Like I don't know. It's tiring and it's leaving me drained like I said it would. And just to close this video, I want to make it clear, this wasn't a doomer video. This wasn't a gaming design kind of video. Like, in my top 30 games of all time, a lot of them are pretty recent games. Like, we'll just start from top to bottom. Number 1, Baldur's Gate 3 came out not that long ago. Number 6, Red Dead Redemption 2 came out again not that long, well, 8 years ago though. Oh my, dude, what's happening with time? 2018 was like last spring, I thought. Anyways, Elden Ring at number 8, again, not that long ago. Cyberpunk 2077 at 9, not that long ago. 10, Resident Evil 2 Remake. I mean, these games are pretty recent games, and they're in my top 10 games of all time. Like, this isn't some sort of, like, there's no more good games anymore. There's no more masterpieces, because there definitely is. But it feels like the rate at which they're coming out is far outweighed by the rate at which these live service games that just die off in, like, 2 weeks are coming out and are constantly talked about and put into the spotlight. Back then, you got banger after banger after banger. That's just how it feels. Maybe that's actually isn't how it played out, but just the feeling is like every game you got back then was a genuine treat to have. And nowadays, it feels like they're very few and far in between, and it's mostly filling the gap with a lot of remasters. But yeah, anyways, that's all I got to talk about, and that's it for me. I'll see you next time.